I am not taking shots at any of these strength and conditioning coaches or the clubs. Yo, Drew from Soccer Kinesiology. This is the review of the process of working on Nikola Stakic's sprint mechanics. Before we dive in, let's cover the absolute fundamentals of linear acceleration. This way we know what we should be looking for throughout the rest of this video. Two things. Number one, we want to stay low. Number two, we want to apply force backwards. But I have to emphasize on point number one, staying low, how I want to see Nikola Stakic get low. I do not want to see Stakic bend at the hips or bend in the upper back. How I want Stakic to get low is adopt a full body lean. So if Stakic's hips were right here, as he adopts a full body lean, his hips get closer to the ground. And to emphasize the importance of this, I actually brought a couple props. Check this out. This weight represents the ground and this tape measure represents Stakic's body. We want Stakic to effectively transfer force through the ground so that he can propel himself forward in acceleration. But let's try that again, this time with a break in his body. So right there, this can be at the hips, this can be in the upper body. In this case, he's not able to transfer force effectively. And he's going to be losing out on acceleration. One of my favorite professors reiterates this point by saying that we can't hammer a nail with a sock. I'll say that again. We can't hammer a nail with a sock. I'll let you think about that a little bit. From here, the reason we want to stay low is that the closer our hips are to the ground, the more opportunity we have to accelerate. I'll say that again as well. The closer our hips are to the ground, the more opportunity we have to accelerate. I've made a very simplified rig of a human leg to demonstrate this point. And from here on, y'all are gonna be seeing what's on my screen and I'm gonna be doing a voiceover. So with the same anthropometrics, when the hips are closer to the ground, so like the rig on the right side, we can see that we increase the range of motion and time we have to accelerate through versus being limited if you're running very tall, like the rig on the left side. You might be wondering, why wouldn't we just take really long and super exaggerated strides? Well, this is because as our ground contact points move up, we apply more force in the vertical direction. And if we were to make ground contact even further in front, we can begin to apply braking forces. Therefore, it's vital that we're striking the ground behind our center of mass and pushing backwards to propel forward. Now onto the fun stuff. Here, Stakic is run before any mechanics work. So we can see that even from the very first stride, he stands right up. His feet loop up pretty high and come down onto the ground rather than stabbing back behind him. Now let's take a look at his acceleration after about 30 minutes of work. Right. So this was about 30 minutes into our first mechanics session, and this is what he was demonstrating. Admittedly, I forgot to film his standing start because the camera was definitely not my priority as a coach. However, this exercise is even harder to keep his hips out in front and push back compared to a regular standing start. So despite being a much harder exercise, he still adopts a more optimal angle. His feet don't loop up as high on the recovery, and he directs much more force back instead of down. So these are massive, massive improvements. Especially when first learning sprinting mechanics, athletes usually feel super awkward and they look super awkward, but Stakic makes it look like he's already been doing this for quite a while. And it's only 30 minutes in. There's still quite a bit of work that can be done. I'm just reviewing the enormous progress that we've made so far. I'd still like to see him lean further forward and keep those hips out further in front of his center of mass. By doing that, he'll be able to direct even more force backwards. And if we look here, even his own body can feel that he needs to lean further. What I'm seeing that suggests this is that as he stands up, he's further braking at his upper body, trying to push more of his mass out in front to get lower. Right? My priority was not to completely optimize, his mechanics in this first session. my priority was for Stakic to know what better acceleration looks like and what better acceleration feels like. This way, he can continue to work on his mechanics, know what to look for, know what to feel for in between sets, reflect on his execution, and give himself feedback on how to improve. And so here's some of the other exercises that we did at our first mechanics workout in slow motion. And I'm hoping at this point that you'll be able to come up with your own ideas of why I might have decided to select each of these exercises. If you're unsure of why I might have included any of these exercises or just want to confirm your ideas, you can leave them in the comments or shoot me a DM. I love talking biomechanics. Here's me letting him know that we still need to have our whole body lean forward and resist breaking at the upper body. Summarizing the entire process of working on Stakic's mechanics, it went amazing. But I have to give a ton of credit to the man himself. This is because I've never seen a player, or I've never expected to ever see a player of his caliber demonstrate such large improvements in such a short amount of time. This is because players like him, they've been running their entire lives, and they've been ingraining their own coordination and their own balance. So for him to quickly adapt his mechanics with relatively basic explanations and cues, I was mind blown. But that's not what I was most impressed with. What I was most impressed with was his proprioception. Proprioception is kind of like people's awareness of what their body's doing. So obviously in the beginning of the session, I helped him out a lot. After every single rep and set, I would say, these things, you're doing pretty well. These things, not so much, and how to improve those things. But as the session went on, I gave him less and less feedback, and I started asking him questions on how he performed. Right? So questions like, were you breaking at the hips? Were you breaking at the back? Were your strides too long? Where were you making contact with the ground? Were you landing toe heavy, midfoot, on your heel? Where were you landing? These type of questions, 9 out of 10 times, he was hitting them right on the nail. That was very, very impressive and just mind-blowing to me, right? Especially as a performer, it's super hard most of the time to know exactly what specific parts of your body is doing, especially if you've never thought about these things before. So I told him that he's one of the fastest learners that I've ever worked with. And together we try to come up with some ideas of how and why he was able to learn so quickly. We came up with a couple, but the idea that stuck the most was when he told me that he's been doing these exercises since U12. So his clubs and teams were making the players do these exercises, but weren't providing enough instructions and definitely weren't providing the biomechanical reasonings behind these exercises. So for the players, they kind of became mundane tasks where they are thinking, oh, these guys are making us do this again, and just going through the motions, right? So what I'm trying to say is that because Stakic was already familiar with these exercises and what they feel like, he was able to kind of bypass the learning process of the exercises themselves and jump straight into focusing on the specific finer details. With that said, I am not taking shots at any of these strength and conditioning coaches or the clubs, because I've been a coach of a big team as well as leading bigger groups before, and I understand that when the entire team's present, talking about these finer details is probably not the best use of time, yet alone actually getting these points across and providing each and every athlete enough attention to practice these skills appropriately. This is where supplementary coaching comes in, where each and every athlete can get enough attention and work on those smaller yet significant details. If you've made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. Drew from Soccer Kinesiology.